Welcome into Philthy, a Philadelphia Eagles podcast presented by I Said What I Said podcast. I'm your host, Brad Wakai, alongside my co-host, Tyson Gentry. And Tyson, it's not a good day for Philadelphia Eagles fans. Not a good day at all, as if you haven't heard by now, the Philadelphia Eagles lost 32-9, and it wasn't that close.
No, I mean, am I alone in this? I told my girlfriend during the game, like right before kick, that I obviously wanted the Eagles to win because I'm an Eagles fan, but I really didn't want to have to watch this team again. Like it was just like I feel like that was the sentiment from Eagles fans going into this. It was, we titled our last episode "WTF Happened," and the signs were there all season long. It's just like this was, we knew they were dead men walking, but it there was just no urgency or fight or anything that kind of defined some of those mediocre Eagles teams, the ones that would finish 9-7 or whatever 10-6, and it was like they're not that good, but they just don't go away. This team went away at every opportunity from week 11 onward.
One of my friends texted me and said, "Man, that was a rough one." I was like, honestly, the last 7 weeks have been hell. I'm kind of glad it's over.
Yeah,
Because it was so brutal to watch this team go out and compete. Like, nobody cared. Nobody looked like they wanted to be there. The coaching, the scheme, the effort, the everything that you can imagine that a football team does on a weekly basis was not there. It was horrible. So it's over. As we said, the Eagles are eliminated. And we got a lot to unpack today, Tyson. Like, we're going to talk about the elimination. We're going to talk about the coaching questions surrounding Nick Sirianni. We're going to talk about things moving forward because Jason Kelce has seemingly told his teammates he's going to retire. What does that look like for the roster construction moving forward? So we got some stuff to talk about, and we're operating on the assumption right now, as Tyson and I are recording this on Tuesday, that Nick Sirianni has not been fired yet. But we think that he probably will. That will change our tune if he does. But knowing Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman and how Jeffrey Lurie is not patient, he's probably on his way out. But we'll get to that in a bit here. But I just want to talk about this elimination a little bit more because the Bucs could have scored 50. And it's everybody goes, "Oh, what did you expect when Patricia took over as defensive coordinator?" I'm like, that's the issue. It was horrible. The issue is beyond that. Like, even with Sean Desai, sure, that was better at the beginning part of the season. That thing was cracked and before Patricia even took over. Like, we're not forgetting, like, it wasn't like everything was going smooth and they looked like the Ravens and the Browns this season. They're like, "Whoa, no, actually we could be better with Patricia." They changed because the defense was being shredded apart. So this was just a bad performance for pretty much the majority of the season.
yeah, and we said it when he got hired. I'm one of the bigger Matt Patricia haters in size and in how much I hate him going around. But like, this is the Sean Desai defense. What 34 to Buffalo, um, 38, 31 to Washington. Not to mention like you got killed by the 49ers and the Cowboys. Like this thing was stinking long before he put his grubby paws on it. He didn't help, right? Like all of a sudden they completely went from a bad tackling team to the worst tackling team in the history of the NFL last night. It was atrocious, but it was typical, and we could see it. Everything felt natural, right? It was like you life of an Eagles fan from week 13 or so onward. With the occasional we're going to score 28 points before we let you come back and beat us. Was you get excited before kickoff, and then kickoff happens, and then you realize that you're watching the same thing that you've been watching for the last 2 months, and then the game ends, and then all of your friends say, "Well, they're going to figure it out." Like I don't know what's going on with that team. It just doesn't make sense. We've been trying to tell you, since the halfway point of this year that something stinks with this coaching staff. And maybe there's something like there's beefs, like legitimate ones between players or factions of players or things like that you can theoretically clean up, right, without having to get a new head coach in. It kind of looked to me like 40 dudes on the team quit on Nick Sirianni. That's just what when I'm sitting here watching it, and it was a lifeless performance, right? Like Devontae was the only one on the offensive side of the ball that felt like he was ready to roll last night and wanted to play a playoff game. And that's a young guy. And we talk about culture, and we're going to miss all these legends. And I'm not trying to slander their names, but a lot of no blame for Jalen Hurts and the leadership because we know he's a leader, but when it looks like this, it's got to be something else. And Kelsey and Cox and Brandon Graham, Lane Johnson, and all those guys that we love and we respect, it was like they can't fix this. Either they're not trying to fix this because they also quit on the guy, or there's like something huge going on. And I'm leaning, heavily towards Sirianni lost the locker room, but I'm just saying there's a possibility that there was some ridiculous beef here that sparked this whole thing. But it's just like you're grasping at straws trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah, and we'll probably understand what those leaks are here pretty soon. Like when something's
Jeffrey
this
will have
big,
them coming. Jeffrey has them ready to roll.
and Howie.
Right
Remember the whole thing with Howie, right? During the Doug Peterson thing, leak. When it got getting bad, this happened again. Leak. Like something's going on with the front office.
Howie's about to survive his fourth head coach. Like it's insane, and not that he shouldn't. He's a good general manager in the NFL, but it felt very similar to waking up the day before Doug got fired, or waking up the day before Chip got fired, and it's like, oh, I didn't know all this stuff, and you got to ask who wants you to know this information when this information starts coming out, and I think, this was a lot of them were like, maybe it's a Jalen Hurts, maybe it's a Brian Johnson, maybe it's a Nick Sirianni issue, but just like the seeds have been planted so that when they rip the Band-Aid, it doesn't hurt so bad.
You mentioned it before, 31 points given up to the Commanders, 28 given up to the Vikings, 23 given up to the Cowboys the first time. The Commanders again scored 31 points. You said the Bills with their 34 points, and the 49ers scored 42, Cowboys 33. A change was made, and then it got worse from there, for the defense. But, for me, if you have a bad defense, you need to have an offense that's shown prowess in the past to be able to withstand some of those things. And so when we're talking about this game against the Bucs, they could have scored 30 in the first half, but self-inflicted wounds prevented them from doing that. The game was there for the taking if the Eagles could look competent. And that's where I think some of the bigger frustrations have arisen from this, right? Because the defense was frustrating to watch for the entire time, right? Like, God, the third downs and the tackling and everything. It was 19-6 because the defense had big sacks. The defense made some stops for once, and it was like, offense, here you go. 16-9, sorry. One score game. And it was like, offense, all right, you just need to put together one drive, and you're right back in this, and then you have a chance to extend your season, and maybe where it's kumbaya again. 3 and out, can't sustain drives. They can't figure out a simple blitz. It just, the total overall incompetence of what we saw from the Philadelphia Eagles was disheartening. And I think that's the best way to put it, because in years past, like you said, Tyson, we've seen the Eagles teams lose. We've seen, things when you're outmatched and outgunned and you're like, you know what, but they tried, and at least we can put our hats on something and hold our heads high because, there was effort there and we just didn't have the players, but maybe the scheme was okay. Whatever the case you want to draw from. This one felt like not only is this team old, getting torched by people, they don't have the guys in place to know what they're doing. They don't have anybody of the replacements who can play. Like, I'm just talking about, I'm sitting back. I have no clue what this football team is. I have no clue what this organization is. And I can't believe I'm saying that a year removed from a Super Bowl that they probably should have won.
We should have known this was coming. This is the life of an Eagles fan. It's quick.
True.
Gets on you fast. I've seen a lot of people compare, like, crazy. Nick Sirianni's first stretch of 7 games matches his last 7, right? 2-5, 2-5, or whatever. The first one, they were active. Like, they were flying around the field. They were overmatched by San Francisco, right, at the beginning of the year. Really picking. I think they beat the Panthers in that stretch, and then everybody else, it was like you're playing against good football teams, and you're in these games with a chance to win all of them. And then the end of the year happened, and the ball got back into the offense's hands, and they were believing it. They were going down and winning football games. This one was Tyrod Taylor, for all intents and purposes, when your starters are out there at least, is blowing you out. The Arizona Cardinals come back and embarrass you at home in a send-off for all of your, legends on Jonathan Gannon Day. Drew Lock beats you, right? Like, you ruined Christmas with a win. I think part of the anger for Eagles fans, at least for me, I was thinking about this, and anger is not the right word, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like, there wasn't a palate cleanser for 2 months. It was just like over and over and over and over again. And you said they can't, like, pick up a simple blitz or scheme something up. I don't know how much it is they can't versus they didn't want to. I feel like a lot of this was spite driven. At a certain point, it was like, we're not running the ball just because you assholes show up at the NovaCare complex with a sign. Well, I'm not doing this just because I get asked that every press conference by a reporter. What I do works, right? That's Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni, and all those guys. It was like I just refuse to believe they can't. It just there's no way. And Nick Sirianni was an offensive coordinator for 3 years with three different quarterbacks in Indianapolis, and those offenses, weren't good. But it was the ghost of some of these former quarterbacks. But they were at least creative in the way that they tried to do things in order to mask the deficiencies they had. Now, with a massive talent advantage against pretty much everybody you play, what else does Devontae Smith have to show you that he's a wide receiver one? Why the hell did his targets go down by 20 this season? His targets are supposed to go up. This doesn't make any sense. A.J. Brown, 125 yards, 8 games in a row. That's awesome. And then let's limit the route tree. Let's cut off his legs. Let's start incorporating Julio Jones. How should we do that? Let's go screen passes behind the line of scrimmage. Who should be blocking? Quez Watkins and Devontae Smith. These are the issues, and that's like we're sitting here. I don't know if they quit on him or what. We quit on him. Why? Because they quit. It became clear, like pretty relatively early with the playoffs in mind, that this team probably didn't have it. We were all just kind of, and they just keep winning. Like they didn't have a convincing win all season. Right. And at a certain point, when the 49ers came in and smacked them, when the Bills smacked them in the second half, the Bills lost that game. But it was that second half into the Niners game, into the Cowboys game. That's it. Like you expect these guys to keep listening to you when everything you're telling them is not only getting their asses kicked, but bro, they look stupid. Like how many defensive guys got picked off last night by their own players because they weren't sure where to be, right? Or how many offensive guys the line's made to look dumb because they're sending 7 and you don't have a hot route, a check down, or a running back there to block. You look, man, it's a different world and everything, and I understand that. If your boss sucks, it's harder to work hard.
And so that's going to bring us into the coaching questions. And Tyson laid out a bunch of different things there. And I think there's a lot to unpack from what you're saying, because we're operating, both you and I, we've been fans of the Eagles. We followed them closely for a long time. Like we kind of know how Jeffrey Lurie thinks and what he operates on. And this is his baby, right? Like he loves being an NFL owner. He wanted to buy the Patriots back in the day. Like this has been a goal of his. He loves football. He loves sports. He used to own the Miami Marlins back when they were the Florida Marlins. This guy loves to own sports teams. So he's not one of these guys who's doing it for the money. He does it because it's a passion. He loves sports. So with that in mind, you have to understand how that guy views it, because just like us and just like all the fans out there, he is probably more so embarrassed because this is his football team. This is him. We know his name as the super fan because he bought the team. Like, this is his toy. This is who he wants to be competing. With that said, I think we would be remiss to not mention, we've seen those facial expressions in the box before. We've seen what he does when he feels like he's embarrassed. And I don't think there's anybody who would say that Jeffrey Lurie is not sitting to how people are talking about his football team, saying they quit, saying that the players stink, saying that this and that, and not being embarrassed by it. So that's why we're coming and operating that. No, like Nick Sirianni, 3 playoffs appearances in his first 3 seasons, back-to-back 10-win seasons, went to the Super Bowl and was pretty much a phantom holding call away from winning it in his second season as NFL head coach. We're operating under the aspect that the Eagles are going to be moving on from him because that's what Jeffrey Lurie does. Is that the right decision? It's only to be seen. I think that's my macro view from it. From a micro view, I think you're absolutely right. The offense was completely inept. Brian Johnson, just over his head as an offensive coordinator and a play caller. It looked like everybody figured out what the Eagles ran offensively. They had no second punch. They didn't do anything right on the offensive side of the football this season. The offensive line, I thought, regressed. The running game was horrendous besides 2 games that you can point to. The passing combinations, horrible. Then the defense got completely worse. They were the 29th worst defense in the league. These are all signs that point to something's going on in the coaching staff. And when the players aren't sitting there understanding or listening, and we know that's a fact because A.J. Brown said we got to start trusting and listening to our coaches, that's an issue. Is it enough of an issue that they're going to hear that in the exit meetings and Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie are going to say, oh, it's Sirianni who's the problem? Or is it the position coach? Like, okay, he can still be our CEO. We just need better COOs. So that's what I'm curious to know here. We think it's going to be the first option where they're just going to clean house.
Well, I would, and other organizations maybe agree that they could look at that and go with the assistant coaches and say we need to clean out OCDC and all these position guys. Brad, the Eagles are the CEO. Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman are the CEO. I don't believe in my heart of hearts that Sean Desai was who Nick Sirianni wanted. I think it would have been Denard Wilson. I don't really know for sure if Brian Johnson is the guy Nick Sirianni wanted. He's getting head coaching looks. So maybe, it was hard for him to fit his offense into Nick's scheme. Like maybe that's a possibility, but this was Jalen Hurts' godfather. Like this was the guy that got basically given to you as quarterback coach. I don't know if he's the one that wanted to promote Matt Patricia when things started looking bad. I think we're going to find a lot of that stuff out. Some of it we're never going to know, and that's okay because that's drama, and we love that when it comes to the Birds, dude. His numbers are his numbers. I don't care about his numbers. Like it's just I've never seen vibes this low on a professional sports team. Like, I don't know if these dudes hate each other, man, or if they hate going to work every day or something. But if you compare, if you go a year ago today, they were kicking their feet up on the couch, getting ready to go in and practice for the divisional round against a division opponent. It was like, we're going to go win the Super Bowl. And 2 months ago, it felt like in the locker rooms, in the post game videos and everything. Again, we're not in there, but it was like this team believes in itself, and as long as they believe in themselves, like I don't know if anybody's good enough to like knock them off their game. And then they mentally broke somewhere along the way, and to me, like if you're not going to be calling the plays on offense, you're not going to be calling the plays on defense. The finger is going to point at you first, and if Nick Sirianni can defend himself, that's fantastic. If I'm the dude, I'm retiring. I'm taking that winning percentage. I'm going straight to Canton. I'm not worried about nothing. I'm retiring with the highest winning percentage in NFL history, all that stuff. Dude, it got so bad that I don't know if he gets a coordinator job next year, right? Like, I think this is like, if he gets fired, I think this is I'm taking a year off of football kind of deal, because I don't know if he was the issue, then that's like real stink. And that's not like Philadelphia specific thing. That's everybody else is going to be looking at this and be like, okay, so you're the one that was yelling all that shit at all the fans, and then you were yelling in the tunnel, and then you're calling the Chiefs back on the field in the Super Bowl, and you're talking smack to Pete Carroll earlier in the year when he loses the challenge, just to go lose that football game, by the way. But all that stuff is fun, and it's awesome when you're winning. When you lose, and you lose the way they did, kind of makes you look like a dick.
Yeah, and that's what I'm curious to see when we come out, because we know the personality of Nick Sirianni. He's competitive. He's an ex-football player. If he feels like he's wronged, I'm going to put it this way. I don't think he's going to have a problem keeping his mouth shut.
Burning it down.
I think he's going to burn it down. And let's be honest here. It's not like the Eagles and Lurie and Roseman are looked at very favorably by a lot of people who've worked there or by other people in the league. Like, Lurie's a nice guy. People like him. They know he's cutthroat. Howie Roseman, people talk shit about Howie. Like, there was a report earlier this season that's a clown show. And that's not the coaching staff. That was about Howie Roseman and how this organization runs their business. So there are people who already view, and this is somebody who used to work for the Eagles too, by the way. This isn't like, oh, the Giants don't like the Eagles, let's fit a pot shot right now. Like, no, this is a guy or a girl who is working for the organization, was asked what they thought was going on, and said that's a clown show organization. And I will say this. It looks really bad right now for Nick Sirianni. It looks like they quit. It looks like he lost the locker room. That's at least what we are viewing from the outside. If they decide to fire Nick Sirianni, we are talking about now a franchise in the Philadelphia Eagles who will have moved on from a coach who made it to the Super Bowl, made the playoffs 3 years in a row, a coach who won the Super Bowl, fired him 2 years later, a coach who started out with winning seasons in back-to-back years before having 1 year of turmoil, firing him, and then moving off of a legendary Hall of Fame head coach. That is the past 4 coaches that we're talking about the Eagles have fired. This is turning into Cleveland Browns, Jacksonville Jaguars territory. Now, I think the only way they can get ahead of it is if they hire Bill Belichick, because then you can say, you know what, we love Nick, but Belichick doesn't come around very often. And then it's like, oh, yeah, well, of course, it makes sense. If they hire Ben Johnson, if they hire one of these hotshot coordinators, Tyson, it's the same old thing. Because Chip Kelly, Oh, great offensive mind coming from Oregon. He's going to change it. Ooh, hot coordinator, Doug Peterson. Look what he's doing with Andy Reid. Ooh, Nick Sirianni, good offensive coach. And he's coming from this system. Just go hire another guy. It's going to be 3 years, churn and burn. And there it's not going to end well, man. I'm just going to put that right here. Like the scheme's going to change and things are going to look good for a couple years, but then S is going to hit the fan and we're going to be in the same situation we are. That's where I'm at with the Eagles organization, dude. I'm telling you, I'm broken. Like I have no clue what to think.
Dude, I would push back just because the way it ended with Chip was horrible. Like they went down to the ball flames. We found out Chip can't coach in the NFL. The way it ended with Doug kind of went down in the ball flames. We kind of just found out that Doug might not be who we thought he was, right, in 2017. Doug just had as big of a collapse as the Eagles did in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't make the playoffs, so it's not a big deal. Andy was here for 100 years, and that kind of was unceremonious, but I think that was agreed upon by both sides there. And then I think there's a world where we find out that Nick Sirianni can't coach. And
Yeah.
like if they're right about all these things, then to kind of counteract what you're saying, if they're in the Super Bowl 2 or 3 years from now with Ben Johnson, then it's like they're always a step ahead. As soon as it goes sideways, Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman know when to pull the plug and when to get somebody else new in. If that is like accurate, we don't know. Brad, I'm kind of starting to think that maybe after a year or two of working with Howie and working with Jeffrey, you might not want to come into work either,
Dude.
because it's early success, quick, and then it has flamed out. But he just drafts his guys, right? Like, when's the last time we got a guy to fit a scheme in Philadelphia? When you draft at the beginning of, at the top half of the draft, first, second round, they draft need in the third round. They draft need in the second round. But when's the last time they drafted an athletic corner? When I'm watching this football team and I'm watching them run around, and then you go watch all the other young dudes in the league, like you go watch Steven Nelson, who couldn't play here, on the Texans, run around. It just becomes abundantly clear that something is going on. Dude, they haven't had like real athletes like flying like 2022. They did, those were all 1-year deals and nobody came back. Now it's just a bunch of bodies. And I think, how he got so many flowers for reevaluating the way that he kind of approached the roster last year. And then he just did the same thing that he did after 2017. And so if we're going to give the guy flowers, he's got to get shit too. Or
No, I completely agree, man. Like, we're talking about the coaches. We're talking about scheme. I think it's abundantly clear that we overrated this roster. Everybody, not just you and me, all the talent evaluators. They're slow. Like, they're not good on defense. Like, the scheme sucks. You know why it's magnified that it sucks worse? Because they don't have players who can play. Like, they're done. The back end, and we're talking about, it's the same thing with Howie Roseman. We want these coaches to evolve. And Jeffrey Lurie's talking about, we want our offense to be cutting edge. Well, you're going to have to start telling Howie Roseman to evolve with football as well. The inability to put money into the linebacker position is a big downfall of the Eagles. The past 10 years of coaches, they don't have anybody who can run sideline to sideline. Tyson, you know what would have helped in the second half of the Super Bowl? If they had a linebacker who could run sideline to sideline. Like, these are things.
Hamilton, Trent McDuffie, those are guys that would have helped.
Jordan Davis looks like he may be just a guy. You know who doesn't look like a jag? Kyle Hamilton. That's the guy you decide not to pick because you don't believe in secondary. You don't believe in linebackers. We're talking about Patrick Queen on the Ravens. Looks like a dude. That could have been a Philadelphia Eagle. This past year, Nolan Smith, we believe in trenches. I want to build it this way through the trenches, and that's great. But you know what they needed? They needed Joey Porter Jr. Like, they needed a cornerback, a young cornerback. They panicked, or Howie panicked when he wanted to re-sign CJ Gardner-Johnson, and he pivoted to Bradbury, gave him a horrible deal. It's little things like this, and he gets a pass for it, and he's Jeffrey's friend. He's friends with the owner, and so he's, like you said, survived 4 head coaches here. What other general manager survives that?
None. Like, maybe if Ozzie Newsome started in the 30s, he could have got through 4 head coaches in Baltimore. Because good general managers draft players to fit what their coach wants to do, not tell their coach how to construct his roster to fit your vision. I'm sick of it. Like, yes, let's celebrate the wins because you should. Like when he makes the AJ Brown type moves, it's like that's Howie's season. But then when when you get Miles Jack, and that's who we're all supposed to be excited about, or the first time you invest in linebacker is an undersized guy with an injury history, the 24 by the time he's coming out of the draft, it's like, yeah, we applauded him for just drafting Georgia guys, Bama guys, because it's like, oh, Howie figured it out. We didn't realize that he was just drafting, a higher end version of the dude that he wanted from the Pac-12 that couldn't play in the first place. There's a cutoff, right? Like 4.7 and below or above, they can't be on the Philadelphia Eagles next year on the draft board because the team speed is just atrocious, and it's on the offense is the offense. I think the offense was made to look like a bunch of bums at certain points this season, and it's made to look slow, and all that stuff by the coaching staff. But you can't ignore the fact that Nicholas Morrow and like Zach Cunningham and Reed Blankenship's a good player. Reed Blankenship shouldn't be your best player in the back seven by a country mile, right? It's James Bradbury is bald because he pulled his own hair out watching his tape. Like this is the biggest decline in the history of the Philadelphia, like in one season. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen somebody drop off like he did, but that's because you looked in the mirror and said, "I'm going to roll into this season with two 30-plus-year-old corners, Keely Ringo, who was a project guy, undrafted dudes, and Mekhi Garner, right? Avonte Maddox that's fantastic until Avonte gets hurt for the year in week 3. It just is what it is. And at a certain point, you can't blame the physio staff or the strength training staff and stuff. You keep drafting guys who miss time in college, they miss time in the NFL, and then you don't have anybody to replace them. How many times we had to watch Sidney Jones run around out there because they just had invested in him, and how he doesn't invest in those guys, and now he doesn't want to go miss again. We're going to get Cooper DeJean, and we're going to be real. It's going to be a mild reaction. Like if they get a corner at 22, Kool-Aid's not on the board. It was this pick right here at 22 and a future first-round pick for Patrick Surtain.
And that's the frustrating thing, I think, when we talk about Howie Roseman and how he's constructed this. And it's like you said, it's Howie season. Everybody's like, "Oh, he's doing it again." And the DeAndre Swift pickup was great, but you know what would have been probably better, I think, for this offense this year, Tyson? A legitimate number 3 wide receiver. But just a long list of things. And I think that's where the frustration that I have with the organization.
Number 2 tight end.
A legit number 2 tight end, just things like that. And they trade for Albert O. That dude didn't play. Kevin Byard, another trade. That dude, we were excited about it. We thought it was a home run. That dude there's a reason why they got him for as cheap as they did. He can't play anymore. Like, it's over. And fall offs happen fast in this league. Like, Howie's been around for long enough, he should know that. Yet for these times, he's missed. And these times cost the Eagles, I think, a year where we were coming in extremely excited about the future. Now I think there's more questions than they've had in a long time. Like, I'm legitimately concerned about where we're at with this roster, where we're at going forward. I don't know what their ideology is. Whatever.
Ideology.
Yes, thank you. Because if they're walking in with a new head coach, because we're going to go back to that. Because if that's what, if Howie wants to save his job, I don't think he'll ever be fired by Lurie. It has to be something bad. But these two are going to probably sit in the room and say, well, it's not Howie's fault. Look at all the Super Bowl rosters he's constructed. So it's got to be the coach. What coach wants to take over this, Tyson? Like, that's what I keep saying. You ran off Andy Reid, you ran off Chip Kelly, and yes, things ended badly there. And Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl, but things ended badly. And he may be overrated, and maybe Nick can't coach. But you think Bill Belichick's signing up for this? You think Mike Vrabel wants to walk into this? And maybe they do. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure what they think or what their agents are saying or what those conversations have been in the past. But from the outside looking in, what type of head coach wants to go work for Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, where it doesn't matter if you've made the playoffs 3 years in a row? It doesn't matter if you went to the Super Bowl and won the thing. If you have one bad year, you're at risk of losing your job. It's crazy.
Well, I think an important thing to keep in mind talking about the Eagles' potential coaching search, because we still don't know if it's going to happen, they never get the guy they want. Brad. And so I think it's funny that fans are sitting here with these dream wish lists. We've had one. We had one when Nick got hired. We had one when Doug got hired. Like Chip was a big swing. I think everybody in the NFL, like it's like if Lincoln Riley finally got hired now, you'd
Mm.
be like, yeah, but everybody was trying to get him at a certain point. That's a win. Doug Peterson wasn't on any list. Nick Sirianni was on the backside of the list after you got to the first 2 pages of guys that told you no. Josh McDaniels strings you along to go to the Colts, to go to Jimmy Irsay. Like you're losing head coaching candidates to those guys. So I'm not, very optimistic that even if Ben Johnson was the guy that they had circled on the list, not for roster reasons, more so like this front office has shown us they don't get the ones that they really want to
Yeah.
get. They get
I think that's a great point.
it's crazy every year, every coaching search, which is starting to feel like every year. But I just getting I feel like the Browns. It's like if you're gonna go out and make a swing, can you just surround them with adults? Like, can we get Mike Zimmer to coach the defense? Can that happen? Can we get somebody who we're not afraid to lose as a defensive coordinator or an offensive like? How many like Spags? Can we get a Steve Spagnuolo? Can like these guys exist? You just don't want to hire them because you want to be on the cutting edge, which is fine and it's great when it works. We've never seen it work. I've never seen it
Especially
work.
not for the Eagles.
No, I mean, in 2017, you win the Super Bowl with Jim Schwartz, who has become a lifetime DC, and Frank Reich, who should have probably remained a lifetime offensive coordinator, but like guys that have been around the block a little bit, like they've been in multiple different buildings and everything, and then you just promote from your guys. And then when you finally branch out, it's Sean Desai. What are we doing?
Well, I know they wanted Vic Fangio like that, so I think maybe it would have been different because he was in the building and they wanted him badly. But again, Tyson, this is where it's an organizational thing. Again, that was slow on now Jonathan Gannon to get to the head coaching job. Vic Fangio had already taken the job with Miami. They were really trying to transition him into the role of defensive coordinator and either fire Gannon or let him go. Jonathan Gannon and Nick Sirianni are friends.
Yeah.
Like they're friends. He brought him with him from the Colts. And this is a Howie Roseman decision. Now, it's probably the right decision. Like I think Vic Fangio is probably a better defensive mind than Jonathan Gannon, but like that's who you're working for. Like let's put it that way. You're working for Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. So when we talk about okay, but if they get an established defensive guy or they need to bring an established offensive guy, Tyson, I don't think they want to because they want to control everything. Remember when they said they hired Nick Sirianni, they're excited to see the coach that he can become. They're excited to have him now. They can mold him into. You're the general manager. How about you worry about your shitty roster that you fucking put together? You know what I mean? Like it's great for a year and then it gets old and you make the same mistakes. You should worry about the scouting. You should worry about actually picking good players. Let the coaches coach. Like that's the thing I'm at here, and it's frustrating because it's the same conversations that we've had constantly since Larry has promoted Howie into this role. I mean, it's insanity. It's the same thing. It's every 3-year cycle that we were doing now with Chip Kelly, then Doug Peterson, and now Nick Sirianni. We're gonna be our 4th one. It's nuts.
Well, they didn't want Fangio because then Howie would have to draft for a 3-4, and he's got no idea how that works. He just knows how to draft. Like the guy. Wait, I have to spend how much on linebackers? I don't care if they rush the passer every play. Did you hear what you just said to me? There's a ton of stuff that has to change on this. It's not an easy fix, and I think all the national guys the Eagles are a pretty attractive job, because they're looking at 2022 Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown and all the fantastic football players that the Eagles have, and those things are true. When's the last time you took a job without meeting with the boss or like a job like this? This is like, let's not kid ourselves. This isn't your entry level position wherever you're going. This is a $15 million a year to run my toy and don't mess it up.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we got to think about that. And sometimes we don't when it comes to football, but I think we should close on this because we mentioned it a little bit. Where are we at with Jalen Hurts? I'm less bullish on him than you right now. Like I'm majorly concerned about Jalen Hurts. Now, I will say this. I don't think Jalen Hurts is the issue. I think Jalen Hurts is an NFL quarterback. I know people are saying, he can't play in the NFL. I disagree. You watch him throw the football, it looks good. When he has reads and when he has timing, he can make plays. My concern is this: can he elevate a roster, or does the roster have to elevate him? And if we're talking about a Jason Kelsey who is retiring, we're talking about a future Hall of Fame center that's not going to be there anymore, who's calling out defenses and blitz schemes and shifts at the line. If that falls on Jalen's shoulders, I was not impressed with him reading a defense this year. I thought he locked into one situation. There's free runners on the other side, and he's not sensing that. Like, that was concerning for me. So thinking about Jalen Hurts moving forward and the amount of money he's going to be paid with this new contract, I am concerned. Now, I know you're not. I want to hear your side of things.
I'm not like overly concerned right now. I mean, we're like if the Bills game ended the season, people are juiced, but it didn't, and so that's the reality. We'll see whatever surgery he's gonna have. Everybody's pretty positive there's gonna be something coming. But he just had no favors done for him like all year, and I think
Okay.
if you take, I can't remember the exact stat, but it's something like his turnover worthy plays was much lower than the actual turnovers ended up being, which I don't really care so much about that. I want him slinging the football around. I want him comfortable. And it just looked like either he can't be comfortable, which is a real concern, or it was an offensive thing because he was bailing out of every pocket.
Oh
And
my
granted, he was
God.
being blitzed every play, and it was kind of like, what do you want him to do here, Brian? Like, do you want him to just sit there back there and get wrecked? Because when he doesn't do that and he doesn't roll out of the pocket, then he has no awareness because then he's not even seeing this free rusher come. He knows he's there the whole time. It's either this run 4 yards to my right and launch this thing out of bounds, or take this lick. And I think at the beginning of the year, it was if he just doesn't regress, we'll be feeling really good. But he did.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't to the level that I think you're alluding to, but it was like it wasn't Wentz overnight from the clown he hit into the next year, right? It was, but it did kind of feel like the 2018 Carson Wentz, where it was like something's going. I don't know what's going. When he took that safety last night, dude,
Oh my
that
God.
felt like watching Carson Wentz.
What
That
was
was like,
that?
what is he doing? What is he thinking? Because this is all we think we know for sure about Jalen Hurts is that he's a hell of a leader, he's a great teammate, and he's a really smart football player. And there were a lot of times this season where his body language didn't look like a great leader. His situational awareness at the end of the games didn't look like a smart football player. And he was sitting by himself. So how can we judge if he's a heck of a teammate? We're not in the locker rooms. We don't know. These guys seem to like him quite a bit. I think a lot of what was going on with Jalen, and I texted you this just the other day. This is just a personal opinion. I think he's pissed that he vouched for Brian Johnson. And I think that everyone else is pissed at Jalen for vouching for Brian Johnson. And that creates a bigger rift as the season goes along. And it's like, this is the offense that you wanted. You'll run it, and you can't. Like, he threw for 38.5 or something this year. He was real close to 4,000 yards, which we used to have a parade for in Philly. Now let's run this guy out of the building. But I think that's a lot of it. Like, this is you picked this dude. You handpicked it. You have the power here. You brought in your best buddy, A.J. Brown, like all this stuff. And this is the offense.
Mm. You know what? You did text me that, and I tend to agree because we heard Lane Johnson. There's going to be changes next year. The players are operating under the assumption that they like Nick Sirianni. Like, they said that they think he should be back. Like, Fletcher Cox was asked, what are about the rumors about Sirianni getting replaced? I think that's premature, don't you think? Like, we just went to the Super Bowl. I think that's
I
overkill.
wanted to ask Jalen Carter, and I wanted to ask Lane Dickerson and Jordan Mailata and stuff, because I know what Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey, I know what those guys are going to tell me. I've heard it for a decade. Ask one of the young guys. See if they tell you the truth.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll know a lot more coming out of these exit meetings. We're recording this on Tuesday. This will be released Wednesday, so maybe some news will break by then. So we'll be back if there is breaking news and everything like that. So kind of a kind of a somber way to go, but it is what it is. Like, that's the reality of when you get eliminated, right? So that's going to do it for us here on Philthy. Tyson, any last words that you want to give before we get out of here?
It's draft season. We're going to be doing draft stuff. And we do stuff that we think Howie would do, and not necessarily what we think is best for the Philadelphia Eagles, which, doesn't always land where we want it to. But I don't think that there's a lot of like most of the draft coverage you're going to read is, oh, they need a linebacker, so here's who they should take, and that's not the approach we kind of attack it at.
We got a lot covered for you here. Not only I said what I said, our other podcasts we cover the national angles and things like that. We're going to be taking a deep dive into everything Philadelphia Eagles this offseason. If there's a new head coach,
They ran the
who
ball
that might
5 times
be.
in the first half. That's my final thought, actually.
Yeah, completely ridiculous. I was texting you just, it was a frustrating game. So, long story short, we got you covered here for all the offseason stuff with the Philadelphia Eagles here on the Philthy podcast, brought to you by I Said What I Said. We'll speak to you guys soon. Peace.